Hello, and welcome to Collie Conversations, the podcast that's all about transforming your life with your Border Collie. I'm Gemma Fisher, a Border Collie training and behaviour expert, here to help you bring out the best in your dog. Whether you're tackling reactivity, recall struggles, or just want to understand your collie better, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about making life with your collie easier, with practical advice, hands-on solutions, and a good dose of encouragement every step of the way. And don't forget, if you want even more support, head over to our Facebook group. That's where you'll find my weekly live Q&A session, exclusive training guides, and a community of collie owners just like you. In today's episode, we're diving into why collies can be so reactive, and most importantly, the first steps to helping make them feel calmer and you feel more in control. So grab a cuppa, get yourself comfy, and let's get started. Right, picture this. You're out on a walk, all right? Just like your ordinary everyday walk. The birds are chirping. Your collie is trotting beside you. You're just thinking, this is a good day. Like, we're enjoying ourselves. And then it happens. Another dog appears. And before you can react, your collie has spotted them and they lunge forward. They're now barking, they're pulling, they're straining at the lead. The wheels have come off and they are flying off in all directions. Your heart just sinks, all right? And you feel the stares of the passers-by as well, all right? Which just adds to the situation, does it? Because you feel their judgment. You feel like they don't have control of their dog. That whole story starts to unfold in you. And generally speaking, you just wish the ground would swallow you up whole. Does it sound familiar? If so, the good news in some respects is that you're not alone. All right. You are not the first Border Collie owner to have felt like that. And unfortunately, you're unlikely to be the last. I'm working on it, but yeah, I would say you're unlikely to be the last. Right. The key thing to know is that the negative reactivity your collie is displaying isn't just bad behavior. All right. It's an emotional response. All right. It's how they're feeling in that particular moment. Now, that barking, that lunging, maybe growling and even showing their teeth and things, it's all a demonstration of how they're feeling rather than a conscious, well thought through response to the situation. All right. Just a bit like you or I, that if we're in a scenario where we're feeling uncomfortable or overwhelmed, we might just react in a bad way. And then when we think about it afterwards, we think, oh, well, I could have done this, I could have done that. In that moment where we're having a strong emotional response, we're just not really thinking, and we're not going to necessarily bring the best response to that situation. And yet, owners often blame themselves. The number of owners that I've sat with, and they tell me things like, have I made it worse? Did I do something wrong in their training? Will my dog ever be normal? And I use that normal word quite loosely because what is normal anyway? But essentially, I guess what they're saying to me, and this is what I've always taken it to mean, is will I ever be able to take my dog out on a walk and not have to be constantly scanning the environment, constantly having to think, will we bump into someone? All right. Now, it's possible. It is possible. You might have missed some micro signs of early discomfort or, worry in your collie. But I think one of the things I'd like to do to hopefully reassure you is that Border Collies are really good at dot to dot. Okay. They're really good at going, do you know what? I see that black dog coming up the road towards me. And the last time I saw a black dog, I felt like this. And so what happens is, because they're really good at doing those dot to dots, their emotions can start to escalate things pretty fast. All right. So whilst, like I say, you might have missed some micro signals early on, it's really only as we start to know more that we can start to spot those things. So if you miss them, you're not a bad person and you haven't done anything massively wrong. Like I say, Border Collies are pretty good at escalating things fast. And also, here's the thing, that even if you did miss those things, blaming yourself for what's happened up to this point is being unfair on yourself. All right. I tell people this all of the time. I have to tell myself this some days too. You can't know what you don't know. All right. You just can't. And honestly, what I know to be true is this: you wouldn't be listening if you didn't have your collie's best interests at heart and you weren't trying to bring out the best in them. You wouldn't bother listening to a podcast like this. So you're on the right track. You're trying to do the best thing for them. And like I say, little things that you might have missed, yes, you might have missed them, but we are where we are now, and so it's all about moving forward and making positive strides forward. Now, the good news is this: understanding the why behind your dog's reactions is the first step towards change. All right. But often people they're not sure where these they're like falsehoods. They're like maybe dog training, myths and things, but there's things that might be holding you back, maybe things that you're not even aware of. All right. Now, many owners believe that reactivity is just flat out aggression. And the problem that they often have in understanding more about this reactivity is that if they've got that in their heads, it's really difficult to start thinking outside the box. And also, the aggression piece doesn't really fit with the dog they know at home. So often, these dogs that can be quite reactive out and about, they can be the most loving, the most sweet, the softest dogs at home, but the wider world doesn't get to see that, because what they get to see is the barking, snarling, lunging, crazy dog out and about in the world. And most owners can't put those two things together. They're like, how can they be essentially like a Jekyll and Hyde? But it's not really that simple, because reactivity is often rooted in other things. It's not as simple as we just have an aggressive dog that we're dealing with. So first and foremost, let's talk about over-arousal. All right, which if you have a Border Collie, you're probably familiar with. And this is true of any high-end energy working dog. Our dogs in particular are very sensitive dogs, and they often struggle to regulate emotions. All right. So if you think of what they're like when they're excited about something positive that is about to happen. So think maybe you getting their evening meal ready, or maybe going out for a particular walk, or arriving somewhere where they know that they're going to be doing something fun, like maybe an agility class or something like that. Think of how over aroused and how difficult they find it to regulate their emotions then. That maybe gives you some insight into why they might struggle to regulate their emotions when they're in an anxiety inducing or an overwhelming situation as well. Now, herding instincts also get blamed for quite a bit, but I think sometimes people misunderstand the point of the herding instinct when they see it. So they often think, oh, my Border Collie is trying to round up cars. I am going to credit my Border Collies and your Border Collies with a bit more sense than that. I think they realize that the cars aren't sheep. But here's the thing: when collies are feeling unsure about something, they'll lean into their superpower. All right. And their superpower is controlling stuff. All right. That is what their genetic makeup is. It's inbuilt in them to be able to control things. So when something like noisy traffic, which also, like, if you think about some traffic, it can vibrate through you, can't it? Think like a big bus or a lorry that goes past. There's like a vibration attached to the noise as well, which if you're a very sensitive animal, such as a Border Collie might be, that's quite a lot. So as a young dog particularly, that might make you quite worried. And that's often what I hear, actually, that the dog's reaction to traffic didn't start until the dog sort of hit adolescence, when they started to feel like they could have more opinions about stuff, essentially. But it didn't mean that it didn't bother them before. It just meant that it started to come out more when they felt more confident about saying so. And when that herding instinct and that ability to go, do you know what, I have this superpower, let me use it, when that started to kick in as well. And when you think about other scenarios, like a jogger pops out of the track in front of us, that they're running along, that can look quite suspicious to a Border Collie that's walking along with its person minding its own business. And that suspicion can make them move into let me control that. Like, I can control that, and that will make it better. And likewise, if you have a dog that is very reactive towards other dogs, if you think about some of the dogs that you bump into, is your Border Collie wrong? Is your Border Collie wrong in terms of the fact that they might be a bit out of control? Even when dogs are on the lead, they can be out of control. All right, you can have a dog on the lead and it can still be like moving around like a fish on the end. So if you think about maybe some of the dogs that you bump into on a regular basis, I can think of a few that they're walked, but their walk consists of being at the end of their lead, pulling, straining, making a lot of noise as they're breathing. They don't look like they're in control. They don't look like they're, in control of their emotions. And that sort of stuff can make a border collie feel uncomfortable. They just want everybody to kind of mind their own business and just, not make them feel anxious. And like I say, that's sometimes where their herding tendencies can appear, but it's not as simple as they're doing it because they're actively trying to herd them into a situation. It's that they're using it to try and make themselves feel better. They're trying to use their controlling powers to make that situation a bit safer for themselves. And the other thing that you'll be familiar with, if you've ever watched a border collie knock a tennis ball under a sofa and maybe start barking at it, is the frustration element. All right, a frustration element which is alive and kicking in most border collies. So one of the things that we can sometimes get with a dog that is feeling a bit worried about something is they feel like they have to go and interact. They have to go and check it out, all right, to see how safe the situation is. So they're not prepared to take your information on it or your take on it. They're like, no, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to go and see that dog. I'm going to go and see that person and like gather my own intel on this. But the issue with this often is that when they go and gather this intel, they get into a situation where they feel a bit socially uncomfortable. Honestly, they are not the social butterflies of the dog world. They are many wonderful things, but social butterflies, they are not. And what they can sometimes find is that they don't know how to exit. And often when they don't know how to exit, they will sometimes resort to maybe a little nip to make that person or that dog go away, because they need that person to exit and go away in order for them to be able to exit. So we need to give them different skills, essentially, to be able to cope with that. And fear and anxiety, you can have different levels, can't you, of whether or not you're really like in terror for your life or just a little bit worried about something. And border collies, just like ourselves, can be on any level of that spectrum in terms of how worried they are about something. But essentially, whatever the trigger is that they are reacting to, the thing that they're doing is they're perceiving it as a threat to their safety. All right. That's why it is bothering them. All right. They're not just doing this for their own health and fun. They're doing this because they are thinking my safety is threatened here. And what that does is it causes the fight or flight mode to be activated. All right. And if you've ever been in that sort of a situation where you just go into kind of a panic mode, you know that you're not making good choices in that moment, are you? All right. And good collies, here's the thing, good collies don't back away from a challenge. They're much more likely to push forward into a situation. I often use the example of, the farmer has sent the sheepdog up the hill to go and get a particular ewe to come down from the hillside. It doesn't want to come down. And the ewe goes, no, I'm not moving. And the border collie goes, no worries, ma'am. I'll go down and I'll tell the farmer. Like, they're just not going to do that. All right. They're just not going to take no for an answer. That's not part of who they are. So that's something that's really important to bear in mind, that whilst we might perceive fear as okay, let's move away from it, our border collie may well be thinking, I'm going to go to it. I'm going to go fight fire with fire. That's their sort of worldview on the problem. So what's the solution? Okay, because you're thinking, yes, I recognize all of this, but what's the solution to all of it, Gemma? Well, here's some initial steps just to get you started. All right. Step 1. All right. And this is a really important one and one that we cannot get away from. We want to observe and identify patterns with some diary keeping. All right. So record keeping is your friend when you have a dog that has reactivity issues, because we want to know things like, when does your dog react? All right. Some dogs will be more likely to react the more tired they get throughout a walk. So one of my students' dogs, she found that his sweet spot was around 30 minutes. All right. And if she did the walk slightly longer than that, then she more or less could guarantee the fact that she would end up with a reaction. So if we're looking to avoid our dogs rehearsing things, we need to know when the dog reacts. We need to know what triggers them. So what particular things are bothering them. And being quite, detailed with a list of those things means that now we're starting to build a training plan for things that we can help them with. And the other thing, and I was only talking to somebody yesterday about this, is how close do they have to be to cause a reaction? So the person I was talking to yesterday, they were saying that my collie can cope if they're in the training field and they are, I don't know, say 10 meters away from another dog walking by. They can check in with them at that point. But if they are walking along a pavement and they see a dog either coming towards them or on the other side of the road, that's too close. All right. And the dog cannot cope. They just lose it at that point. So knowing how close they have to be is important as well, because that, again, forms the basis for what we will be thinking about in our training and behavior adjustment plan. Now, step 2. This is really important as well, I'm afraid, guys. We're going to have to adjust our expectations, all right? And the first piece of that is understanding that your dog is not being difficult on purpose, all right? When they are in full-on reactivity mode and they aren't listening to you and they're just basically kicking off and making you feel uncomfortable, it can feel like, this is personal. Let me just assure you, it really isn't. They're not being difficult on purpose. I don't think any dog would choose to be that worked up any more than any human being would. So knowing that piece is, I think, an important piece of the puzzle. The thing to understand is that controlling their emotional response is just a skill they haven't learned to manage yet. The important thing being yet, and they can learn, and absolutely it's possible. It's just something that they cannot do just yet. And I see our job as their kind of, the parental role in this relationship is to help educate them. All right. So that they have training that gives them different options other than the one that they're currently using to, get that space away from whatever is making them feel uncomfortable, to feel safer, to feel more confident. Because essentially, if they've got a few more tools in their toolkit, they're going to be going out into the world feeling a lot more comfortable. And if you think about, this crazy human world, there are times when we need, those sorts of things as well. I'm thinking of the Calm app that I use quite regularly on my phone. Can be really good for things like meditation and other bits. Not suggesting you set your Border Collie up with it, but you get my drift. That often the human world can be overwhelming to humans, never mind a sensitive animal like a Border Collie. Now, step 3, and this is going to be important as the beginnings of your plan. We need to look at reducing the overload at home, because we need to get our dog into a space where they can start taking on board new information. All right. And first off, we need to look at, is our dog getting enough rest? Because often if we have a Border Collie that's just hypervigilant at home, it can really interfere with their beauty sleep. So, watching at windows, barking at passers-by, all of that stuff, brilliant, in terms of guard dog duty, but not so good in terms of them getting rest, which they need to be able to take on board new information and process it properly. And just, I don't know about you, but I am not at my best when I have not had enough sleep. And our Border Collies are no different. So this is something, that needs to be taken into account as well. The other thing at home, and this is something that lots of Border Collies struggle with because they're very good at making their people do things with them, is too much adrenaline inducing activities. All right. So this is things like obsessive behaviors around tennis balls, footballs, any ball around the house. But it can be things like household activities too, like, you sweeping or mopping, or I don't know. I've had dogs in the membership before that have told me about just like they're trying to use a spray bottle and wiping up stuff that can cause their dog to get all worked up. So anything that is sort of those obsessive behaviors, they're often spiking the dog's adrenaline levels, and they're not actively, using their brains. They're just, being obsessive about things. And that stuff can interfere with good rest and good sleep as well. So those are things that we need to kind of look at and go, okay, are there things that we can do slightly differently to avoid them getting into those situations? And we'll definitely be talking about this some more in the next episode. And that's a wrap for today. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode gave you the insight and motivation to make real progress with your collie. A big shout out to today's sponsor, Collie Culture Club, my online training membership designed to give you the personalised support you need. Inside the club, you'll get my expert feedback on your training, weekly live sessions with me and wonderful guest experts, and a supportive community to help you every step of the way. Don't forget, you can find all the details about the club, plus the resources mentioned in today's episode, inside our Facebook group. So be sure to check it out. Understanding why your dog reacts is just the beginning. Next time, we'll dive into the hidden reasons, stress, health, and lifestyle behind their behaviour. So stay tuned. Until next time, keep focusing on progress, not perfection, because every small win counts.